Virgin millionaire, he is lonely and becomes obsessed with the new housekeeper. One unexpected night, he leaves the bedroom door open. She watches him, then a move of theirs changes everything. Before anything else, comment here. Do you believe in happy endings? And subscribe so you don't miss anything. The fine rain ran down the glass of the black car as Emily watched the scenery pass before her eyes. The yellowed streetlights mixed with the shadows of the trees along the deserted road. The driver, a silent and serious man, kept his eyes fixed on the wet track, showing no interest in the woman in the back seat. Emily took a deep breath. It was not the first time she would work for a rich and demanding family, but something inside her told her that this experience would be different. The Stormfield mansion where she would take on the role of housekeeper had a peculiar reputation. The few who had worked there rarely spoke about the young heir who inhabited it. What was known was that Benjamin Storm was reserved, controlling, and kept his distance from practically everyone. When the car passed through the iron gates and entered the property, Emily found herself holding her breath. The imposing building rose before her, surrounded by tall trees and a silent ambiance. The mansion, with its classic architecture, boasted huge windows and stone walls, emanating a mixture of elegance and isolation. The vehicle stopped gently in front of the main entrance. The driver quickly got out, opened the door, and made a discreet gesture for Emily to exit. She adjusted her overcoat, smoothing the fabric over her curvy body, and stepped out with firm strides. The cold night air brushed against her skin, sending a shiver down her spine. Before she could knock on the door, it opened. A middle-aged woman with a rigid expression and assessing gaze stared at her for a moment before speaking. "Emily?" "Yes." The woman nodded and stepped aside, allowing her to enter. "I'm Isabella, the head of the staff. I'll show you where you'll stay and explain your duties in the morning. Mr. Storm is in his office and doesn't like to be disturbed at night." Emily merely nodded, absorbing the coldness in the woman's voice. The interior of the mansion was even more imposing than she had imagined. The polished wooden floor reflected the glow of the crystal chandeliers on the ceiling. The furniture, made of dark wood, was exquisite but conveyed a touch of austerity. The decor was not excessive, it was functional yet grand. As they walked through the corridors, Emily noticed the absolute silence. No laughter, no conversation, just the discreet sound of her heels touching the floor. "Does Mr. Storm live alone?" she asked, trying to ease the strangeness of the environment. "Yes." The short answer made Emily raise an eyebrow. "No visitors? Friends?" Isabella hesitated for a moment before answering, "Mr. Storm doesn't receive many people." Something in those words made Emily feel an inexplicable chill. When they arrived at the room assigned to her, Isabella handed her a key and a warning look. "Breakfast is served at 7. Don't be late." As soon as the woman stepped away, Emily closed the door behind her and let out a sigh. On the upper floor of the mansion, Benjamin stood in front of his office window watching the arrival of the new housekeeper. His eyes traveled over her silhouette with a mix of curiosity and tension. He didn't like changes. He didn't like new people in his house. But when Isabella insisted they needed someone competent, he acquiesced, as long as everything was kept under control. But upon seeing her get out of the car, he felt something different. Emily was magnetic. She wasn't young like the women who usually surrounded him on the rare occasions he ventured to social events, but there was a confidence in her, a way of moving that exuded experience and mystery. Benjamin did not consider himself an impulsive man. He had always been methodical, calculating, with absolute control over himself, but upon seeing her cross the front door, he felt an unease. It was as if her presence destabilized something within him. He abruptly turned away, banishing the thought. He needed to keep things as they had always been. In that house, everyone had their place, and Emily would be no different. The next morning, Emily woke up early, took a quick shower, and dressed. Impeccably, a black pencil skirt, a blue silk blouse, and an elegant bun. Nothing that could draw attention, but enough to maintain her firm and professional posture. Descending the stairs, she found Isabella and the other staff gathered in the kitchen. The housekeeper explained the house rules in a direct tone. Strict. Schedules, impeccable cleanliness, absolute discretion. But no one mentioned Benjamin. When she finished breakfast, she was called to the employer's office. She took a deep breath before knocking on the door. "Come in." The deep, firm voice came from the other side. Emily turned the doorknob and entered. Benjamin was sitting behind a solid wood desk, his hands clasped before his face. His eyes were intense, a deep blue, analyzing her carefully. He was younger than she expected. Not a boy, but a 25-year-old man with a commanding presence. The dark grey suit fit perfectly on his tall and slender body, and his brown hair was impeccably styled. But what captivated her the most was his gaze. Benjamin did not blink. "Welcome. I hope you are professional and discreet." Emily crossed her arms, holding his gaze without hesitation. "Don't worry. I know exactly how to deal with demanding employers." Benjamin remained silent for a few seconds. Something about her lips, the firmness of her posture, intrigued him. He had worked with many housekeepers. None made him feel like this. Something inside him tightened. He did not like this feeling. But he knew that from that moment on, he would no longer be able to ignore it. Benjamin's eyes remained fixed on Emily for a time that seemed too long. It was not just an assessing glance. It was something more intense, almost predatory. Emily maintained her composure, but felt a chill run across her skin. She had dealt with powerful men before, men who used silence and coldness as armor. But Benjamin was different. His gaze did not convey arrogance or disinterest, but rather a kind of curiosity, almost a restlessness. He averted his gaze for a brief moment, took a deep breath, and leaned back in the chair, his fingers gliding over the wooden surface of the table. "Isabella must have already explained your functions to you." "Yes." "Then I don't need to repeat anything." "No, Mr. Storm." The way she pronounced his name sent something stirring within him. It was the first time he heard her speak, directly to him, and her voice was captivating, mature, filled with a confidence he was not used to finding in the people around him. He inhaled slowly and forced himself to maintain his posture. "Great. I want discretion and efficiency. That's what I always deliver." The response was immediate, direct, as if she were challenging him to doubt her. Benjamin felt his jaw clench. He was not used to this. The people around him were always predictable, always submissive to his money, to his position. But Emily, she didn't even blink in front of him. Benjamin cleared his throat, as if he needed to regain control of the situation. "You may go." Emily nodded and turned on her heels, walking towards the door with natural elegance. Benjamin observed every movement of hers, every curve that her fitted dress outlined. When she opened the door, she hesitated for a second and turned her face slightly toward him. "One last thing, Mr. Storm." Benjamin raised his gaze. "I am not like the others." The phrase hung in the air for a moment, laden with a meaning. He did not comprehend immediately, and then, without waiting for a response, Emily left, closing the door behind her. Benjamin stood still, feeling a strange warmth spread through his body. He did not know exactly what it was, but he knew that Emily was not just another employee, and that deeply unsettled him. The following days became a silent game. Benjamin, in his controlled manner, began to notice Emily more than he would like. Her perfume seemed to permeate the environment, soft and yet intoxicating. Her footsteps echoed through the mansion's halls, and he noticed, even against his will, the way she moved. She was not like the women he knew. She did not play cheap charms, did not try to grab his attention, and perhaps because of that, she caught it even more. One afternoon, he went down to the library in search of one of the books from his personal collection. The environment was his refuge within the mansion, a space where no one bothered him. But upon entering, he found Emily organizing the volumes on the lower shelves. She was kneeling on the floor, her hair held in a loose bun, with some loose strands falling around her face. Benjamin stopped in the middle of the room, surprised to find her there. "What are you doing?" Emily raised her eyes unhurried, as if she knew he had been there since the moment he entered. Organizing. The shelves were a mess. Benjamin frowned. "I like the way they are." She smiled slightly and lifted a book, showing it to him. "So you like philosophy books mixed with detective novels?" Benjamin pressed his lips together. In fact, he had never organized the library. He always took the books as needed and returned them to the nearest place. Emily raised an eyebrow, waiting for a response that never came. "Don't worry. I will leave everything exactly where it was, just in a better way." She returned to concentrating on what she was doing, completely ignoring him. Benjamin stood still for a moment, then averted his gaze and walked to one of the higher shelves. He picked up a random book just to disguise. But as he turned to leave, he heard her voice again. "Have you always been this way?" He frowned, not understanding. "This way how?" Emily did not lift her face. She kept running her fingers along the spines of the books as she responded. "Controlling." The word hit him like a provocation. He took a deep breath, feeling a wave of irritation and something else. "I am disciplined." Discipline and control are different things. Now she was looking at him, and for the first time in a long time, Benjamin felt that he did not know how to react. He could end that conversation right there. He could simply turn his back and leave. But he didn't. He just watched her. Emily held his gaze, assessing him as if she saw something beyond the surface he always showed the world. "I think I don't like being analyzed." "That's because you are not used to it." Benjamin narrowed his eyes, but before he could say anything, she stood up and picked up a stack of books. "Well, I've already disturbed your reading. You can return to your absolute silence now." Her tone was light but laden with something he could not identify. Before Emily could leave the library, Benjamin did something he did not expect himself. "Do you like to read?" She paused for a moment without turning. "Yes." "What is your favorite genre?" Emily smiled slightly, as if she had noticed the subtle change in his posture. "Suspense." And then she left, without saying anything else. Benjamin stood still, holding a book he did not even know what it was, and for the first time he felt that someone had broken his rigid control pattern. He should ignore her. But he knew it was already too late for that. The following days were marked by a silent tension. Benjamin perceived Emily in every corner of the mansion, and this bothered him more than he would like to admit. He tried to maintain his usual detachment, his cold and unshakable demeanor, but something in him had already changed. And he hated that realization. Emily, for her part, seemed oblivious to what was happening inside him. She moved around the house with ease, performing her duties with impeccable efficiency. If she noticed Benjamin's glances, and she did, she never showed it. Her behavior remained steady, as if there was absolutely nothing abnormal between them. But there was, and Benjamin felt it every moment his eyes rested on her. That morning, he came down for coffee earlier than usual. He was used to having his meals alone, but as he entered the dining room, he found Emily setting the table. She wore a fitted black skirt and a light white blouse. Her hair was arranged in a loose bun, with a few strands falling around her face. It was a simple image, almost trivial, but Benjamin felt a strange warmth rise in his chest. He cleared his throat, trying to dispel that discomfort. Emily looked up at him and smiled faintly. "You woke up early today." Benjamin didn't like how she said that, as if she knew him well enough to notice his routine. "I have commitments." She nodded, showing no interest. She simply went back to arranging the table. Benjamin sat down in the main chair, took a cup, and began to pour coffee. But his eyes involuntarily remained fixed on her. There was something about Emily that troubled him. She wasn't a woman who seemed concerned with being desired. She didn't strive to attract attention, and yet it was impossible to ignore her. And that unsettled him. "Have you always worked in this area?" The question escaped before he could contain himself. Emily, who was folding a napkin, raised her eyes, surprised by his initiative. "Yes." "How long?" 20 years. He frowned slightly. "You started early." She smiled slightly. "Some people have no choice." The answer stirred something within him. Benjamin knew the weight of obligation, but he felt that Emily's experience was different from his. He had always had money, comfort. For her, work seemed to have been a necessity from the very beginning. Silence lingered. Emily finished setting the table and turned to him. "Do you need anything else?" Benjamin held the cup with a bit more force than necessary. He wanted to say no. He wanted to let her go, to keep a safe distance between them, but at the same time, her presence intrigued him in a way he couldn't explain. "Do you mind keeping me company?" Emily raised an eyebrow. "Do you think it's appropriate for a boss to ask that of his employee?" Benjamin hated the way she turned the tables against him so easily. "I don't see a problem if it's just for coffee." She looked at him for a moment, evaluating him, and then pulled out a chair at the end of the table, keeping a safe distance. "All right." He nodded and took a sip of coffee, feeling the strange weight of that situation. He had never asked anyone for company. He had never needed to. But there he was, sitting with Emily, unable to ignore the feeling that something was about to spiral out of control. The days passed, and her presence in the mansion began to become something inevitable. Benjamin started to notice her in the most mundane moments. When she crossed the hallways, when she stopped in the kitchen to talk to Isabella, when she climbed the stairs at the end of the day. But there was one specific thing that troubled him more than anything else: her perfume. It was a soft, enveloping scent that seemed to permeate the air whenever she passed by. And on quiet nights, when the entire mansion was asleep, Benjamin found himself remembering that smell. He hated it. He hated the vulnerability that began to grow within him. One afternoon, he decided he needed some fresh air. He grabbed any book and went to the garden at the back of the mansion, where a wooden bench was hidden among the trees. It was one of the few places where he felt truly alone. But when he got there, he found Emily. She was sitting on the bench, her eyes closed, her face turned towards the sun. Benjamin stopped in the middle of the path, indecisive. He didn't want her to think he was following her. But before he could back away, she opened her eyes and saw him. "Sorry." She adjusted herself. "I didn't know this was your refuge." "It isn't." The answer came out too quickly. Emily raised an eyebrow, clearly sensing the lie. "Then sit down." Benjamin hesitated. He didn't like being told what to do, but for some reason, he didn't want to refuse. He sat down next to her, keeping a safe distance. Emily was silent for a moment before asking, "Have you always been this alone?" The question caught Benjamin off guard. He didn't like talking about it. "I like my privacy." "That doesn't answer my question." Benjamin squeezed the book in his hands. "Yes, I have always been this way." Emily watched him for a while. "It must not be easy." He looked away, feeling a strange knot in his chest. "I'm used to it." Silence fell between them, dense, heavy with something Benjamin didn't know how to name. Emily finally stood up and adjusted her skirt. "It was a good coffee, Mr. Storm." Benjamin looked up at her. "Just Benjamin." She smiled faintly without saying anything and then walked away. Benjamin stayed there, alone, with the strange feeling that something inside him had been touched for the first time, and he didn't know how to deal with it. The mansion was silent. Time passed slowly. On that cold night, and Emily had already finished her tasks. She was in her own room, sitting on the edge of the bed with an open book in her lap, but she couldn't concentrate. There was something in the air, something dense, unsettling. In the last few days, Benjamin seemed more attentive to her. His gaze lingered a little longer than necessary. The reserved demeanor was still there, but Emily noticed a new detail. He was testing boundaries, and she was too. It was a silent dance, an undeclared game, but present in every encounter through the hallways, in every exchange of glances. And, deep down, Emily knew something was going to happen. The question was when. Close to midnight, she decided to grab a glass of water before going to sleep. She walked down the long, dark corridor of the main wing, her bare feet against the soft carpet. The absolute silence of the mansion seemed to amplify each of her steps. As she passed by Benjamin's room, something caught her attention. The door was ajar. Emily paused for a moment, frowning. Benjamin was meticulous about his privacy. He always locked the door, always kept everything under control. But that night, the crack let a dim light escape from the lamp. She should have just kept walking, but she didn't. Her gaze slid through the opening of the door, and that's when she saw him. Benjamin was turned away from the entrance, slowly unbuttoning his shirt. The fabric slipped off his broad shoulders, revealing every detail of his defined muscles. The warm light of the room cast soft shadows on his skin, and Emily felt her heart race. Her instinct told her to look away, but she couldn't. Benjamin turned slightly, grabbing another piece of clothing from the bed, and it was at that moment that Emily noticed something disturbing. He didn't seem surprised. On the contrary, his gaze met hers through the reflection of the mirror in the corner of the room. It was an instant, a second, frozen in time. But in that second, something was said without words. Benjamin didn't close the door, he didn't cover himself. He just stayed there, allowing her to look. Emily felt her body heat up, her breath became shallow, and no matter how much her mind screamed that she should move on, her body wouldn't budge. Benjamin unbuttoned his pants with a slow, almost deliberate gesture. Emily swallowed hard. This wasn't an oversight. It was an invitation. The tension was palpable, intense, dangerous. Then, in a sudden gesture, Emily broke the eye contact and kept walking down the hallway, forcing herself to maintain an indifferent posture. But inside, her body still burned. Behind her in the room, Benjamin smiled slightly. He got what he wanted. The next morning, Emily tried to ignore what happened. She tried to act as if nothing had changed, but something had changed, and Benjamin knew it. He came down for breakfast later than usual. When he entered the dining room, he found Emily already busy organizing the dishes. His gaze lingered on her longer than it should have. "Good morning." The tone was casual, but there was something different. Emily, who rarely felt intimidated, shivered at the sound of his voice. "Good morning, Mr. Storm." He pulled out the chair slowly and sat down, watching her as she moved around the room. "Did you sleep well?" Emily paused for a brief moment, surprised by the question. He never asked that kind of thing. She turned slowly, crossing her arms. "Enough." Benjamin held the coffee cup, his thumb absent-mindedly sliding over the edge. "I hope nothing kept you awake?" Emily held his gaze. So that was it. He wanted to provoke her. He wanted to see how far she would hold up that game. But she wouldn't back down. "Nothing that bothered me," she replied with a small smile. For a moment, Benjamin's eyes shone with something intense. He rested his elbow on the table and ran his fingers over his lips, a gesture almost contemplative. "I'm glad to hear that." The silence stretched between them, loaded with tension. Emily realized she needed to leave before she made a mistake. She turned to pick up some dishes, but as she moved away, she felt Benjamin's gaze lingering on her back. He was testing limits, and she was dangerously close to crossing them. That night, the game continued. Emily crossed paths with Benjamin several times around the house. Small moments, quick exchanges of glances, subtle touches of a world that hadn't yet been explored between them. And then came the moment that would seal the fate of this silent tension. At dinner, Emily poured wine for Benjamin. It was something routine, part of her role, but in a misstep, her hand brushed against the glass, spilling the scarlet liquid on her snug dress. The silence was immediate. Benjamin watched the wine slide down the fabric, clinging to her body, each drop highlighting her curves even more. His eyes darkened. Emily held her breath. For a moment no one moved. Then Benjamin, in a rush, grabbed a napkin and extended it to her. But his hand hesitated for a second before touching hers. It was an instant charged with electricity. The touch was brief, but Emily felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Benjamin swallowed hard, stepping back as if he had just realized what he had done. Emily took the napkin, slowly wiping the wine away. "I can get something to clean it better," Benjamin said, his voice rougher than he intended. Emily raised her eyes, a discreet smile on her lips. "Don't worry, accidents happen." But they both knew that it hadn't just been an accident. That night Benjamin couldn't sleep. The image of Emily, the brief touch of their hands, the way she looked at him. He wanted more, and he knew it wouldn't be long before one of them crossed the line. Night fell over the mansion, plunging its corridors into a thick silence. The light rain drummed against the windows, and the wind rustled through the trees in the garden, creating an atmosphere of almost palpable isolation. Emily tried to ignore the unease that had been growing inside her since dinner. Theo's brief touch, his gaze heavy with tension, the way he seemed to hold his breath when he saw her with the wine spilled on her dress. All of that followed her. Like a ghost, an insistent thought that refused to go away. It was dangerous. It was inevitable. After a hot bath, she put on a satin robe and sat on the bed, running her fingers through her damp hair. She tried to convince herself that it was nothing more than a game of fleeting tension, that Theo, with all his coldness and control, would soon lose interest. But then, why did she feel that knot in her stomach every time he was around? And, above all, why did she want to test how far it could go? On the other side of the mansion, Theo stared at his reflection in the mirror. The air in his room felt suffocating. Since the moment Emily left the dining room, he felt as if an invisible current was pulling him to where she was. He had never experienced that before. Desire had always been a distant idea for him. He had never let himself be carried away by impulses, never allowed his body or mind to be taken by someone. But Emily broke all his certainties. The way she spoke to him without fear, without hesitation, the way her perfume lingered in the corridors after she passed, the way the wine streamed down the fabric clinging to her body, tracing every curve in an almost indecent way. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. If it continued like this, something would spiral out of control. And he didn't know if he was ready for that. Emily woke up in the middle of the night, feeling her throat dry. She got up, holding the robe to her body, and left the room without turning on the lights. The hallway was dark and silent, the entire mansion engulfed in an oppressive tranquility. She descended the stairs slowly, her bare feet muffling her steps on the carpet. Upon reaching the kitchen, she opened the fridge and grabbed a bottle of water, taking a few sips while staring into nothingness. Then she felt something, a presence. She turned slowly, and there, standing in the kitchen entrance, was Theo. He was wearing only grey sweatpants, his bare feet on the cold floor. His hair was tousled, as if he had just gotten out of bed, and his bare chest shone under the dim light of the lamp. Emily held her breath. He had never been so vulnerable before her, and for the first time he seemed less controlled. Can't you sleep?" Her voice came out lower than she intended. "No." The silence that followed was overwhelming. Theo's eyes slowly traveled down Emily's body, stopping at the way the satin robe molded her curves. The thin fabric revealed too much, she noticed, but she didn't back away. Theo stepped forward. She felt her heart race. "I've never done this before." His voice was a rough whisper, heavy with hesitation and need. "But I know I want to." Emily could have laughed. She could have broken the tension with a sarcastic remark, as she usually did. But she didn't laugh. Because this was no joke. It was something intense, something that pulled them both down an irreversible path. And then, without thinking, without measuring consequences, she took a step forward too. The space between them dissolved. Theo raised his hand slowly, as if touching her was the most forbidden act in the world. His fingers brushed against the soft skin of Emily's arm, and she closed her eyes for a second, absorbing the warmth of that touch. He hesitated, and it was she who took the initiative. She moved even closer, his chest almost touching hers, their warm breaths mixing in the short space between their faces. "Then do it! It was enough!" Theo moved in a desperate impulse. His mouth found hers, and the kiss was overwhelming. There was no delicacy, there was no uncertainty. It was the explosion of everything they had held back until then. Theo's hands slid around Emily's waist, pulling her closer, as if he needed to feel every inch of her body against his. Emily moaned against his lips, allowing her fingers to explore the warm skin of his chest, feeling every muscle tensed beneath her touch. Theo was inexperienced, but his desire was raw, instinctive, and that made him even more dangerous. Minutes blended together, and the kiss deepened, becoming denser, more urgent, until suddenly Theo pulled away. His chest rose and fell rapidly, his fevered gaze locked on hers. He seemed unable to complete the sentence. Emily licked, her lips still tasting him there. She knew what that meant. She knew that if they continued, there would be no going back. But she also knew that they had both crossed the line, and that, sooner or later, they would do it again. Theo stepped back as if he needed to regain control. Emily merely smiled faintly. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She turned and left the kitchen, leaving behind only the echo of her footsteps and a Theo completely destroyed by desire. Emily couldn't sleep that night. Her body still burned, her mind reliving every detail of the kiss, every touch of Benjamin, every breath held between them. It was not just desire, it was something deeper, something she couldn't name. The problem was that this couldn't happen. Benjamin wasn't just any man. He was her boss. He was a young man accustomed to absolute control, someone who had never experienced what she already knew so well. He was inexperienced, but not innocent. And that made everything even more dangerous. The next morning, Emily tried to act normally. She followed her routine with surgical precision. She organized the chores of the mansion, talked to the staff, ensured that everything was in order, but with every step she took, she felt Benjamin's invisible presence in her mind. And then, during lunch, the inevitable happened. Benjamin appeared. In the dining room, he was impeccably dressed as always, but there was something different. The look, The tension in his shoulders, the way his hand gripped the glass of water tightly. He wasn't hiding it. He wasn't pretending that nothing had happened, and Emily noticed it immediately. The silence between them was unbearable. The other staff members were there, busy with their tasks, but the electricity between the two was almost visible. Then Benjamin did something unexpected. He cleared his throat and broke the silence. "I need to talk to you." The words came firm, direct, but she sensed the hidden tension in his voice. Emily placed the napkin on the table and faced him. "Now." He nodded. She hesitated for a brief moment, but she knew this had to happen. So she stood up and followed Benjamin out of the dining room. He led her down the hallway and into his office, closing the door behind them. Emily's breath quickened. Benjamin turned slowly, and for a moment neither of them said anything. His gaze was fixed on her, burning. "What happened yesterday?" he began, his voice deeper than usual. "I can't stop thinking about it." Emily crossed her arms, maintaining a firm posture. "Are you scared of what you're feeling?" Benjamin laughed humorlessly, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know what I'm feeling." Emily stepped a little closer, reducing the distance between them. "So tell me, what do you want now?" The question hung in the air, dense, charged with expectation. Benjamin took a deep breath, and then he crossed the line. In a swift motion, he grabbed her waist and pulled her closer. Emily barely had time to react before his mouth took hers again. This time, there was no hesitation. The kiss was urgent, intense, an explosion of everything they had held back until that moment. Benjamin pressed Emily against the wall, his hands holding her waist firmly. She moaned against his lips, feeling his heat against her body. He was out of control, and she loved it. Benjamin's hands slid along the curve of her back, holding her with a strength that made it clear how much he desired her. Emily buried her, fingers in his hair, pulling him closer, deepening the kiss. Benjamin squeezed his eyes shut, feeling his own heart hammering in his chest. He had never done this before. He had never touched a woman like this. But with Emily, it felt instinctive, it felt inevitable. Their breaths mingled, bodies pressed together, and for a moment Benjamin felt like he could simply lose himself, in her forever. But then he pulled back. He let go of Emily slowly, as if realizing too late what he had just done. The air between them was heavy, charged with desire and something deeper, something Benjamin couldn't name. Emily took a deep breath, trying to regain control. If this goes on, there will be no turning back. Benjamin ran his tongue over his lips, still tasting her there. He already knew that. And for the first time in his life, he didn't care. The office was engulfed in an overwhelming silence. Benjamin's body still vibrated from the impact of the kiss, his lips burning from her touch. He had never felt this way before. He had never allowed anyone to breach the walls of his discipline, his absolute control. But Emily was not like the others, and this terrified him as much as it fascinated him. She watched him, her breathing still erratic, her eyes laden with something dangerous. But unlike him, she seemed completely in control of the situation, as if she had known from the very beginning that this would happen. And maybe she did. "This can't go on." Emily's voice came low, but firm. Benjamin felt his stomach tighten. "Why?" She let out a short laugh, laden with irony. "Because you are my boss, because I am older, because this will end badly. Choose a reason." Benjamin watched her for a long moment, his heart hammering hard. "And yet, you want to stop?" Emily narrowed her eyes, as if she did not like the boldness in his question, but she did not answer, and the silence was enough for Benjamin to know the truth. No, she did not want to stop, and that was his ruin. The relationship between them changed. In the following days, every encounter was charged with tension. Every exchange of glances felt like a minefield about to explode. Emily tried to stay strong. She maintained her routine, fulfilled her obligations, avoided Benjamin whenever possible. But he did not make things easy. He watched her from afar, attentive to her every move, like a predator studying its prey. He did not pressure her, did not speak of what had happened in the office, but his gaze said it all, and Emily felt her skin burn every time he was nearby. One afternoon, while organizing some papers in the library, she heard silent footsteps behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The air around her changed. It became thick, charged. She continued to focus on the papers, pretending to ignore him. But Benjamin stepped closer. Slowly. He stopped behind her, close enough for her to feel the warmth of his body. "Aren't you even going to look at me?" His voice sounded low, near her ear, and Emily felt a shiver travel down her spine. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath before replying, "I have no reason to." Benjamin smirked. "Are you sure?" Emily turned slowly to face him. He was close, very close. His blue eyes fixed on her, intense, burning. "What do you want from me, Benjamin?" He fell silent for a moment, studying her. Then he finally answered, "Everything." The word hung between them like a precise blow. Emily felt her chest tighten. Benjamin was not joking, and that scared her more than anything else. She was not a woman who was easily impressed. She had met men of all kinds, arrogant, manipulative, insecure. But Benjamin was different, because he didn't know how to play. He wasn't pretending, and that made him dangerous. Emily took a step back, trying to regain control. This will not end well. Benjamin stepped forward, closing the distance she tried to create. "I don't care." His eyes burned with desire. Emily felt her own body betray her, her heart racing, her lips parted. She needed to end this. She needed to get out of there before she made a mistake. But when Benjamin raised his hand and touched her face gently, she knew it was too late. She was lost. The cold wind hissed between the trees surrounding the mansion, carrying a portent of something that Emily still could not name. Since crossing the line with Benjamin, since admitting even without words that she also desired him, an unease took hold of her chest. It was not just the excitement of a forbidden romance. It was a shadow, an uncomfortable feeling, as if something approached, silent, hidden in the darkness. And then everything began to crumble. That night, Benjamin could not sleep. He spent hours tossing and turning in bed, his mind tormented by thoughts he shouldn't have. About Emily, about what she did to him, about the desire that burned stronger and stronger, threatening to consume everything he thought he knew about himself. And then, fate intervened. In the middle of the night, the persistent sound of the phone shattered the absolute silence of the mansion. Benjamin frowned and sat up in bed, grabbing the device. "Hello." On the other end of the line, Isabella, the head of the staff, sounded tense. "Mr. Storm, there's a man at the gates. He wants to speak with Emily." Benjamin's body immediately stiffened. "What?" "He refused to leave. He said he will only go when he speaks with her." Benjamin felt something icy run through his veins. A man behind Emily. Without thinking, he got out of bed, grabbed a coat, and left the room. His heart raced as he crossed the dark corridors, his hurried footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. Upon arriving at the entrance of the mansion, he found Isabella and one of the guards standing in front of the door. "Who is he?" Benjamin asked, his voice deeper than usual. Isabella hesitated. He didn't want to say his name, but he seems to know Emily. Benjamin didn't wait for anything else. He opened the door and stepped outside. The cold night air hit him immediately, but he barely felt it. His eyes were fixed on the man waiting outside the iron gates. The dim light from the posts cast shadows on his face, but Benjamin could see The cynical expression, the overly relaxed demeanor, as if he were accustomed to dealing with situations like this. "Who are you?" Benjamin asked, his patience practically non-existent. The man gave a slow smile. "That doesn't matter. I just want to talk to Emily." Benjamin's stomach churned. "She doesn't want to talk to you." The man's smile widened, but his eyes remained cold. "Oh, yes, she will, because if it's not by good means, it will be by bad." The threat was like a punch to Benjamin's chest. His fists clenched. He had never fought before. He had never needed to. But at that moment, something primitive and uncontrollable rose to the surface. "I suggest you leave now, before you regret it." The man laughed. "And you think you scare me, rich boy?" Before Benjamin could react, a new voice broke the cold night air. "What are you doing here?" Benjamin turned and saw Emily standing at the door of the mansion. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, her breath quickening. And at that moment, Benjamin knew, whoever that man was, he was part of her past, and he was not someone she wanted to see again. Emily quickly descended the steps, ignoring the cold that prickled her skin. She knew this day would come. She knew he would find her again one day, but she didn't expect it to be here. She didn't expect it to be in front of Benjamin. She stopped beside the millionaire, her heart hammering against her ribs. "What do you want, Liam?" The man smiled slyly. "Ah, so you still remember my name. What an honor." Emily felt her jaw tense. Liam was a ghost from a past she wanted to bury. A dangerous past, and now he was there, threatening everything she was trying to build. "Go away," she said firmly. Liam shook his head, feigning disappointment. "Oh, Emily, don't be so cold. I just came to retrieve what is mine." Benjamin stepped forward, his whole body tense. "She is not yours." Liam looked at him for a second, assessing him, and then let out a low laugh. "Oh, is that it? You're her new toy?" Benjamin felt his blood boil. He didn't know exactly what Liam was to Emily, but he didn't like the way he spoke to her, as if he owned her. Emily, however, remained motionless. If there was one thing she had learned throughout her life, it was that men like Liam fed on fear, and she would not give him that pleasure. "I am no one's, Liam, and you have nothing to retrieve here." Liam's expression changed. The playful look disappeared from his eyes, giving way to something much darker. "I wouldn't be so sure." Benjamin felt a cold chill run down his spine. Something was very wrong. He would need to protect Emily, even if it meant facing a danger he had never known before. The silence that followed was piercing. The cold wind blew between them, carrying the tension in the air. Benjamin didn't take his eyes off Liam, his whole body ready to react to the slightest movement from the man. He might be inexperienced in fights, but something inside him, something instinctive, told him that this guy was dangerous. Emily stood firm, but inside she felt like she was on fire. Not out of fear she had faced men like Liam before, but because Benjamin was there, ready to protect her, even without knowing against what. And that changed everything. "If you knew what was good for you, you would come with me now." Liam crossed his arms, his dark eyes full of threat. Emily took a step forward, her gaze steady. "It's over, Liam. Whatever you think you still have with me died a long time ago." The man tilted his head, studying her, like a predator about to pounce. "You still don't understand, do you?" He laughed, a low and cruel sound. "I'm not asking." Benjamin, who had been trying to stay calm, stepped forward. "If you don't leave here now, I'll make sure you never come back." Liam let out a mocking laugh, his eyes dancing between Emily and Benjamin, and then he raised his hands as if he didn't want trouble. "All right." His smile was false, his expression a mix of disdain and amusement. "I'm leaving." He turned around, walking slowly towards the gates. But before leaving, he turned back one last time to Emily. "This isn't over yet." And then he vanished into the darkness. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't show it. Benjamin, however, was not willing to let her carry that weight alone. Who was he? Emily closed her eyes for a moment. She sighed. "Someone I would prefer to never see again." Benjamin remained silent, waiting. He knew she would speak in her own time. Finally, Emily looked at him. "Liam was part of my past, a past I'm not proud of." The confession hung in the air. Benjamin watched her, his mind whirling with questions, but he didn't pressure her. He just said, "He won't hurt you." Emily laughed, without humor. "And how can you guarantee that?" Benjamin stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. "Because now you're with me." The air seemed to vanish from Emily's lungs. She wanted to argue. She wanted to say that he was too young, too inexperienced, and that he had no idea what he was promising. But when she felt the warmth of Benjamin's hand on her face, she realized there was no more room for escape. There were no more doubts. She was lost in him and didn't want to be found. That night, the mansion was immersed in absolute silence. Emily tried to sleep, but sleep didn't come. The encounter with Liam, the veiled threat, Benjamin's presence, everything made her restless. Then, without thinking, she got up. She left the room, crossing the dark corridors, guided by an instinct she couldn't control. When she stopped in front of Benjamin's door, she noticed it was ajar, just like that night. Her heart raced. She entered. Benjamin was sitting on the edge of the bed, elbows resting on his knees, his gaze lost. But when he saw Emily, his eyes lit up with something he couldn't hide. She approached slowly, stopping in front of him. "Are you okay?" Benjamin lifted his gaze, his face heavy with emotions he didn't know how to express. "I can't. Stop thinking about what happened today." Emily sighed, sitting down beside him. "I've dealt with Liam before. He doesn't scare me." Benjamin turned his face to her, his expression filled with frustration. "But he scares me." Emily's heart tightened. She didn't want him to worry. But at the same time, there was something profoundly moving about the fact that Benjamin, the man who had always lived in absolute control, was there, vulnerable, because of her. And then she did what she wanted to do since she entered that room. She touched his face. Benjamin closed his eyes, leaning against the palm of her hand. "I've never felt this way before." His voice was just a whisper. Emily smiled, sliding her fingers along the outline of his strong jawline. "I know." Benjamin opened his eyes, and it was there, in that moment, that Emily made her decision. She wouldn't fight anymore. She wouldn't resist what was already inevitable. Then she leaned in and kissed him. This time, without hesitation, without fear. Benjamin reacted immediately, his hands holding her waist, pulling her closer. The kiss was warm, intense, a mix of need and discovery. He laid her down on the bed, their bodies intertwined, desire growing between them like an out-of-control fire. Benjamin explored every touch, every sensation, as if he were learning a new language with Emily's skin. And she guided him, showed him the way, the rhythm, the pleasure, and that night Benjamin became a complete man, but more than that. That night, he became hers. The sun was beginning to tint the sky with golden hues when Emily opened her eyes. The soft light filtered through the curtains of Benjamin's room, casting delicate shadows across the space. She blinked a few times, feeling the warmth of the body beside hers. Benjamin. He slept deeply, his face serene, the features relaxed in a way she had never seen before. He was turned towards her, one arm still resting on her waist, as if, even unconsciously, he didn't want to let her go. Emily held her breath for a moment, allowing herself to absorb that moment. Something within her had changed. It wasn't just the desire or the overwhelming attraction. It was more than that. But did Benjamin know? Did he understand what that night meant? Or was it all just a new experience for him? The doubt gnawed at her inside. She knew she was a different woman from those he could have. Older, more experienced, carrying marks of a past he didn't even fully know. And yet, he was there. And there was something in his peaceful expression that made her want to believe that maybe he wouldn't leave. Emily slowly moved away, trying not to wake him. She got up, dressed quietly, and walked to the window. But before she could lose herself in her thoughts, Benjamin's hoarse and sleepy voice filled the space. "Are you going to run away?" She turned and found him with his eyes open, watching her. There was no uncertainty in his gaze. There was no regret, only intensity. Emily crossed her arms, leaning against the windowsill. "I don't usually stay afterwards." Benjamin sat up slowly, resting his elbows on his knees, the sheet sliding off his bare torso. "But this time you will." The phrase wasn't a request, it was an assertion. Emily narrowed her eyes, trying to understand what was going through his mind. "And why are you so sure about that?" Benjamin stood up and walked towards her. "Because I'm not going to let you run away." She let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. This here might not work out." "It might." Benjamin lifted a hand and gently touched her face. "But it could also work." Emily felt her chest tighten. Did he really believe that? Was he really willing to face all the consequences? She didn't know, but at that moment she wanted to believe he did. The following weeks passed in the blink of an eye. Benjamin and Emily were no longer just a secret within that mansion. They belonged to each other without needing words to reaffirm that. But the world around them was not so simple. And deep down, Emily knew that something still lingered in the air, waiting for the right moment to strike them. And that moment arrived. It was on an ordinary morning. Emily was in the library, reviewing some administrative documents, when she heard hurried footsteps in the hallway. The door suddenly opened, and Isabella entered, her face pale. "Emily, there's someone waiting outside." Emily's blood ran cold. "Who?" Isabella hesitated. "It's Liam." A chill ran down her spine. She should have guessed. He wouldn't give up so easily. Emily took a deep breath and stood up. "Tell Benjamin, but don't let him come out here." "Are you sure?" Emily nodded. She needed to face this alone. When Emily reached the entrance of the mansion, she found Liam leaning against his car, arms crossed, a smug smile on his face. "You came quickly." She stood her ground. "What do you want?" Liam sighed, pretending to be disappointed. "You know me, Emily. I never leave empty-handed." She felt a knot tighten in her throat. "If you think you can blackmail me, you're mistaken." He laughed. "Oh, darling, I don't need to blackmail you. But I think your boyfriend wouldn't be happy to know a few things about your past." Emily's heart hammered against her chest. Liam continued. "I can put an end to all of this, Emily. You know that." She clenched her fists. "Go away, Liam." He stepped forward, his eyes glinting with malice. "Or what? Are you going to ask Benjamin to throw me out? He doesn't even know who you really are." Emily didn't allow herself to falter. "He knows enough." Liam laughed again. "Let's see how long this lasts." Then he got in the car and drove off, leaving only the smell of threat in the air. Emily closed her eyes for a moment. The storm was coming, and she didn't know if Benjamin was ready to face it. Emily knew she wouldn't be able to hide the truth for long. Liam was a shadow she had left behind, a past she had buried with great difficulty. But now he was there, threatening to destroy everything she had built. And Benjamin had no idea what he was about to discover. That night the mansion seemed quieter than usual. Emily couldn't relax. She paced the room back and forth, her breathing irregular, her heart heavy with the decision she had to make. She needed to tell Benjamin, before Liam did, before he found out in the worst possible way. She gathered her courage and left the room, crossing the hallways to his office. The door was ajar, and it was there that her world crumbled. Benjamin was standing in the middle of the office, holding an envelope. Beside him, Isabella kept her head down, as if she didn't want to witness what was about to happen. When Emily entered, Benjamin slowly lifted his eyes to her, and in the moment he saw her expression, he knew. He already knew. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Benjamin. He lifted the envelope, his fingers gripping the paper tightly. It was Liam who brought this. Emily closed her eyes. It was too late. Benjamin opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of papers, the contract of an old brothel in your name. His voice was low, but filled with something Emily had never heard before. Disillusionment, pain. Emily felt her stomach churn. She knew exactly what he was talking about. Liam had delivered the worst piece of her past, and now everything was about to collapse. Benjamin took a deep breath, trying to maintain control, but it was impossible. You owned a brothel, Emily. She didn't shy away from his gaze. There was nowhere left to run. Yes. The silence was sharp. Benjamin ran his hand through his hair, his mind spinning. He was trying to put the pieces together, trying to understand, but he could only feel an overwhelming weight on his chest. Was that how you met Liam? Emily nodded. He was my partner. The confession fell between them like a blow. Benjamin stepped back, his eyes fixed on her as if he no longer recognized her. Why didn't you tell me? Emily swallowed hard. Because I knew that when you found out, you would look at me exactly like this. Benjamin closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He wanted to scream. He wanted to say that none of this mattered. But it mattered, because everything he thought he knew about Emily had just crumbled. And then, in the middle of that turmoil, he realized the only thing that truly mattered. He loved her. The silence dragged on. Emily didn't try to justify herself. She didn't plead for forgiveness. She just watched him, waiting for the verdict. Then Benjamin did the only thing he could do. He turned and left the office, and Emily knew she had lost him. The following days were torment. Benjamin avoided Emily at all costs, and Liam disappeared, as if he had done exactly what he wanted, destroyed everything. Emily thought of leaving, thought of giving up, but something stopped her. The love she felt for Benjamin, and the certainty that deep down he still loved her too. Time passed. And then, weeks later, something unexpected happened. Emily woke up feeling strange. Her body was different. Her heart was racing. And when she saw the result of the pregnancy test, she knew her life would never be the same. She was expecting a child. From Benjamin. She needed 3 days to gather her courage. When she finally entered his office, she found him sitting at the table, lost in thought. Benjamin said nothing when he saw her. He just waited. Emily walked up to him, stopped in front of the table, and then handed him an envelope. Benjamin frowned, opened the envelope, and when he saw what was inside, he was left breathless. An ultrasound. Emily watched him closely. I didn't want you to find out this way, but I needed you to know. Benjamin ran his fingers over the paper as if he needed proof that it was real. Then slowly, he raised his eyes to her. And in that instant, something changed. Emily's past didn't matter anymore. Liam didn't matter anymore. The only thing that mattered was what was there, between them, the future they had together. Benjamin stood up, walked over to Emily, and for the first time since everything crumbled, he touched her. held her face tenderly, and said the only thing she needed to hear. "I never wanted anything as much as I want you." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure?" Benjamin nodded. "I am." And then he kissed her, sealing, in that instant, the beginning of a new story. A story that finally didn't belong to the past, but to the future they would build together. If this story touched your heart, leave your comment below. We want to know what you felt while following this exciting journey of love, overcoming challenges and second chances.